Fall is in the air and the Reds offseason is well underway. Welcome in, everybody. Chatterbox Reds. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Nick, how we doing?
Doing good. Watching a little Arizona Fall League action while all you suckers are watching the Cubs.
Watching the Cubs or watching Monday Night Football or spending time with your family or doing something other than recording a Cincinnati Reds podcast on October 6th that they got eliminated last week. But either way, the craziness, here we are, Nick. The mental that we have, I don't know, but nonetheless, we're here. You're home for Cincinnati Reds news and updates and rumors all off season long is Chatterbox Sports. So we appreciate you tuning in nonetheless. And Nick, we talked in a little bit of a podcast earlier on Monday about some news, but want to go back over that, but then also talk about some of the other news that came out of a media availability today with Nick Krall and Brad Meador, and go through some of the updates that they provided. And that starts, of course, with Terry Francona and his staff all being invited back for 2026.
Yeah, we discussed that. I don't really have any additional thoughts. I know there's been a lot of conversation on that. It was just something that was so expected that I don't know. I'm ready to move on and hope that we could do better next year.
Okay. Well, if you haven't already heard our thoughts on that, make sure you check out our video from Monday morning or early afternoon, I guess, by the time it was posted. Nick and I both gave our thoughts on that coaching staff along with some other news. So make sure you check that one out and all of the other great content that we have here on Chatterbox. The other piece that I think is going to be probably the most controversial piece coming out of this media availability, even maybe more so than Chris Valaika and this hitting staff keeping their job and all being invited back, is that Elly De La Cruz is in fact going to be your Cincinnati Reds shortstop in 2026. There is no move to the outfield in the foreseeable future for Elly De La Cruz.
I don't think this is controversial. I don't think there's a team in baseball that would have the Reds like personnel and would consider moving Elly off of shortstop. He had a disappointing year defensively. He had injuries, he had other things, but he still wasn't that bad. Like, there's bad shortstops. Elly committed a lot of errors, but was not a bad shortstop. The numbers would indicate it. And again, the guy the year before was like plus 15 outs above average. So no, if he's really bad in 2026, then yeah, maybe you consider a move. But right now, there's no reason that trying to replace Elly De La Cruz at shortstop. It wouldn't work. Like shortstops are very, very expensive, and the Reds don't have anyone else that could step up and play that every day.
Well, I'll challenge you, Nick, and say clip this segment right now and put it on Facebook, put it on TikTok, and I think we can all agree that there are bound to be plenty of comments about Elly De La Cruz moving to center field, most likely calling him Error De La Cruz, probably misspelling De La Cruz. So yes, I understand that between you and I, not controversial. Amongst Reds fans as a whole, absolutely controversial. And I am very confident in what the comments will say if we do, in fact, put this one as a standalone on social. One other piece that I think is probably important for this Reds team as they move forward into 2026 that Brad and Nick Krall talked about was about trying to figure out how to best utilize Elly. Obviously, Elly De La Cruz went into 2025 with the goal to play all 162 games. He did that, but at what expense, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, the quote here: the best to deploy him going forward on a daily basis over the course of a full season, acknowledging that he wore down a bit in the final months. Okay, why did we not do something in the middle of the season? Like, why now? This is maybe the first sign. I'm trying to read between the lines of the front office, maybe challenging some of the decisions that were made on the field, because that's kind of what this feels like. Because I don't think that decision to play Elly 162 games was a demand of the front office. Felt like that was definitely a Francona move because he was trying to, I don't know the right word, honor Elly and his wishes to play a full season. But yeah, this seems like maybe the first move that maybe there's some, I don't want to say there's like any contention here, but maybe there's a little bit of a challenging And I hope there is a challenging, because I think there was definitely a lot of managerial moves that deserve to be challenged. They deserve to be studied. They deserve to be analyzed. If this team and everyone around them wants to be better in 2026.
Yeah. And look, I don't know how much there is dissent between the front office and Tito. I wonder if this isn't a message to Elly saying, hey, look, you're our superstar. We understand that. And we understand that you want to play 162, but let's take a look over the last 3 months and see what happened. And let's try to make the right baseball decision, not only for the Cincinnati Reds, but for Elly De La Cruz's long term, because it's not beneficial to Elly to play 3 months without a home run, or however long he went, nearly 2 months between home runs, as he looks to the future of his contract and the future of his profession here in the MLB. Like, whether it's with the Cincinnati Reds, the LA Dodgers, or anybody else, Elly De La Cruz is in line for a big contract when that time comes. And he's not going to get the maximum value that he could get if he goes out and wants to play 162 games every single year and he goes nearly 2 months between home runs. That's just not how you get the maximum value for Elly De La Cruz. And I would imagine that that's part of this conversation between the front office and Elly is, look, it's not best for the Reds, but it's certainly not best for Elly De La Cruz either. So hopefully he understands that. You know, he's still young, 23. Is he officially 24 yet? I don't think so.
His age 24 season will be next year.
Yeah. So turns 24 in January. So, I mean, he's young enough. He's got to take some of the leadership from there. But Tito's got to be willing to step up to that, right? We talked about accountability in our previous podcast, and that means that Tito's got to take accountability too, and he's got to be able to put it back on the guys and make sure that that they understand what's best for them and for the team. A couple other major not really major, but other takeaways from the media availability that we want to touch on really quick. We'll actually skip the first one that you had on the list, Nick. We'll go with Matt McLain. Obviously struggled in 2025, but still lofty expectations for the young second baseman in 2026.
Yeah, the official thing in here was Matt McLain looking forward to a fully offseason healthy after a disappointing 2025. Yeah, I mean, look, it was disappointing. I don't think it was as disappointing as other players. I think Gavin Lux's 2025 season was significantly more disappointing, given the fact that the Reds gave up not just a top 100 prospect, but also a draft pick for him. And he was 0.3 wins above replacement. Just because he hit a little bit better doesn't mean he was actually a valuable player. So I do take a little bit of issue to that. I feel like Matt McLain's getting like all the venom. And, you know, I was watching a baseball game tonight, Craig, and I saw Tommy Edman batting fifth for the Dodgers. And then I went and I looked at Tommy Edman's stats this year, and I was like, oh, wow, Matt McLain actually had better offensive stats than the guy batting fifth for the Dodgers in a playoff game. I don't know why Matt McLain got just so much venom. It felt like so unnecessary this year. But yeah, I'll ride and die with Matt McLain. I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to have a good year. I don't think you are your worst version of yourself and you still hit 15 home runs, you still play good defense, and there's not something there.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm excited. I mean, I know obviously Trace was really high on Matt McLain in 2025. And so if he can even become, you know, just half of what he was expected to be in 2025, I think that's a step up compared to where he was, obviously. Next bullet point was, at least in my opinion, the first baseman of the future for the Cincinnati Reds, and that's Sal Stewart.
Yeah, I agree full-heartedly. Sal Stewart, lots of room for growth, will compete for first base, third base spot, learning to grow his whole game. I would just say play first base. I wouldn't have him moving around. The Ke'Bryan Hayes health situation makes it a little bit more challenging, I guess, to where you do have to have backups. That kind of goes into the other point, and I'll just go ahead and say it. CES will compete for roster spot at first and third base in 2026. I think I would rather CES kind of be the guy that maybe bounces back and forth, but he still has more to prove, and kind of be your Ke'Bryan backup. And maybe there's also some other players that could kind of fit that role as well. But yeah, for Sal, I'd be telling him, learn first base. You're a first baseman next year. Don't overthink it. I'd stick him there, and I wouldn't even mess with it.
You know, one spot that is not expected to have a competition, although things can always change, that's center field. And obviously, TJ Friedl's been a topic of conversation in terms of where he fits into this roster moving forward. Some people may not believe that he's necessarily a center fielder. Reds still think that he's a solid candidate to fit that need, though.
Yeah, they did acknowledge like his speed was, I think they said inconsistent was kind of their official wording. So, yeah, I don't know how he still put up positive defensive metrics despite being the slowest or one of the slowest center fielders in the sport. So that kind of does give me pause. Like, how long can you continue that up? Like, it's kind of one of those guys you watch and you're like, how are you doing it? Like, I don't really know how he was doing it. But again, TJ Friedl's been a very valuable player, and I think he's a guy that I think went from overrated to underrated to maybe back to underrated again at the moment. But yeah, he's a valuable player, and I guess I did like they at least acknowledged that, because it felt like they'd kind of been like hiding, like, yeah, we don't want to mention that our center fielder is kind of slow.
Yeah, it's definitely was apparent in certain moments, but we hope that TJ Friedl is able to come around, because I do think that he provides something to this lineup as a consistent left-handed bat, even when a left-handed pitcher is pitching. But whether or not he's a center fielder, I don't know. One thing that I do know is that one of the pleasant surprises of 2025 was out in right field, and that was Noelvi Marte. We got some news about him that we hadn't heard yet on Monday, didn't we, Nick?
Yeah, going to continue to work on right field in the Dominican Winter League, so that's good. I'm guessing that maybe Marte said, I think they have to ask permission to go play the Dominican Winter League, and I'm guessing they said, yes, as long as you are only playing right field and you're working on that. We don't want you going out there and playing third base, or them sticking you somewhere. And there is a little bit of, I know, bartering like with them if you're a major league player. Yeah, I'll go, but I need to work on this, and this. So it seems like they made it a point to say he'll be working on right field, which is good. I mean, I think that's great. Him to get more experience in right field feels like a guy, Craig, that maybe not I wouldn't put it past him. Maybe not behind at the end of next year, but maybe you give him 2 more years in right field. I could see him really becoming a massive plus out there, kind of like Fernando Tatis Jr. Fernando Tatis Jr. went out there and has become like a Gold Glove caliber right fielder. I'm not saying Marte is going to take that big of a leap, but I think that's kind of the trajectory I see, because it just felt like every single game he was getting more confident as the season went on, and obviously he had robbed that big home run that ended up being one of the signature plays of the entire season.
Let me throw this at you, Nick, and obviously you can throw it right back at me because I didn't prep you at all for this, but we just got done talking about TJ Friedl and his below average sprint speed, actually in the 32nd percentile, according to the Baseball Savant in 2025. On the flip side, Noelvi Marte was 89th percentile. Is there a world where those two flip and Friedl moves to right and Marte plays center? Or maybe even Friedl's not on the team anymore and Marte's your center fielder every day? You see that ever happening if he can, in fact, kind of learn the position of the outfield a little bit?
I don't know if I'd mess with that much. It feels like I would just kind of let Marte just settle into right field. Marte, I think, also has a significantly better arm than Friedl as well, so you kind of would be sort of losing that. The one thing about like Great American Ballpark is if you do have a slower center fielder, you can kind of hide it. And especially if they run Will Benson out in left field, they have Marte out in right field and Friedl in center. Yeah, Friedl might be the guy in center field, but you're still going to be covering a lot of ground with those other guys, kind of covering the gaps a lot better. So that's kind of a way to hide it. I don't think I personally would mess with Marte. Would you?
Here's what I would say, I guess, is they obviously have concerns about TJ Friedl already, right? And the question becomes, is it easier to either draft or replace through free agency to get a center fielder? Or is it easier to go out and get a subpar defender to put into right field and then allow Marte to move over to center field? We talked obviously about right field being one of those positions where you don't necessarily have to be a great defender, but you expect power out of that position, right? So if Marte can become a solid defender, I think there's a world where it makes more sense for him to be in that role. But how great would it be if you could just get power out of Noelvi Marte consistently and allow him to be that, we kind of say it tongue in cheek, but allow him to be that acquisition that the Reds kind of needed to make anyway and become one of those power hitting bats in the outfield that gives you 25 home runs a season without having to go out and spend 25 to 30 million dollars over multiple years in order to make it happen. So I wouldn't rule it out. I'm not going to sit here and say that it absolutely should happen, but I'm not going to rule it out, especially if TJ Friedl continues to show a decrease in his ability to get to balls. Because how many times did we see balls hit towards center field this year that we thought TJ Friedl could have gotten to that he just didn't end up getting to? And if Marte can get a read on balls quickly enough and get that jump, which seemed to be the thing he most lacked this year was the response time, then I think that he has the ability to take over that position personally.
I think I'd rather have Benson in center and move Friedl to left than and keep Marte kind of in a set spot. Because I thought Benson actually looked better defensively in center field than in left field.
You're just making the assumption that Terry Francona is going to allow Will Benson into the doghouse.
Well, the nice thing is if the organization says we're moving TJ Friedl to left field and Benson to center field, it makes it a lot harder to take Will Benson's name out of the lineup. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone because you can't take Will Benson out of center field and put Gavin Lux in center. You can't put Spencer Steer out in center field. So it almost could be what we'll call Tito-proofing the roster, which is unfortunately, I think, something that's going to be a common theme this offseason.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I'm interested. I certainly think that that's one of the storylines for 2026 and beyond is those outfield positions and what the long-term plans are beyond just right now. Because you know better than I do. Is there anybody in the wings at AAA or beyond that is imminent in the outfield beyond the guys that are already on the roster?
Not really. I mean, honestly, Reese Hines and Blake Dunn are kind of the two, but I don't think the organization trusts them. I honestly, a Will Benson, Blake Dunn platoon in center field, I think could be really good. I know a lot of people would be down on that. Carlos Torre kind of looked like a guy, but doesn't look like a guy at this point. There's a guy, Arnaldo Lantigua, but I mean, man, he just got to Daytona. And Hector Rodriguez, I think, definitely profiles more as a corner outfielder. So yeah, there really isn't a center fielder in the immediate future. Now, there's about 6 guys that I think are in Daytona or lower that I think the Reds really believe could be a center fielder, but I mean, they're still quite a bit of ways away.
Yeah. All right. Well, one thing that obviously we just touched on and is certainly expected and needed is an improvement in the power across this entire lineup. And that was something that the Reds didn't necessarily shy away from on Monday.
Yeah, the quote, frequency of contact and power is something that needs addressing across the board. So first time we've actually heard the word like needing to address the power. Certainly not as strong as like Craig Breslow of the Red Sox said in a press conference, but nonetheless, at least they acknowledge that they do need to add power. And I hope that is a focal point of the offseason, and I hope that's a focal point also of just filling out the lineup card with the players already in the organization.
Yeah, for those of you that didn't see Craig Breslow in his kind of like end of the season press conference, similar to what we saw today with Nick Krall and Brad Meador, he specifically went out of his way to talk about how all of the teams that are currently in the playoffs and succeeding in the playoffs hit the ball over the wall and hit home runs. And that's something that I think this Reds team could certainly embrace in a more effective way. And especially in a ballpark like Great American Ballpark, there is absolutely an opportunity for them to improve that. And obviously, if that is the case and they progress into the playoffs, that's something that'll help them in that case, because certainly against the Dodgers this year, it would have been nice to have a couple power hitters in some of those key moments when the Reds had bases loaded and nobody out and proceeded to score no runs. But nonetheless, we'll see. One other talking point real quick. Not necessarily a surprise, especially given how late it was last year before we heard any update about this, but we're about to talk about the MLB offseason calendar, Nick, and well, the Reds have yet to set their budget for free agency.
Yeah, I this is always like how is this not set yet? Yeah, it's always, well, we haven't said that yet. Okay, like what are we waiting on? I don't know. Maybe there's something I don't understand about that. But yeah, you hope that some of the attendance numbers that did go up and some of the really good attendance late in the year. That last series where the Reds played the Pirates, 2 of those games they outdrew the Cleveland Guardians in their playoff games. So that's certainly something they probably weren't expecting. So hopefully that could give them a little bit of a boost. I don't think it's going to be that much, but every little bit certainly helps.
Yep. Every little bit helps. Final talking point from the media availability was about this young core of arms that the Reds have. Obviously, we know Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott, amongst others, but they talked about young arms and some of the health issues that they faced in 2025, Nick.
Yeah, they said they're going to manage closely Chase Burns and Rhett Lowder going into 2026. And again, I think as one thing we'll talk about, when we talk about some of the arbitration prices is I think starting pitching is something that I think feels like there's a lot of depth, but I don't necessarily think there's as much depth as I think a lot of people think. And Charlie Goldsmith, one of his articles I read today, kind of laid out that exact same point where, yeah, I think a lot of people want to trade a starting pitcher because they feel great. But when you kind of really pull back and you look at, okay, Hunter Green didn't finish a full season. Nick Lodolo came close, but he still hasn't. Andrew Abbott looked gassed in August. You kind of go down the list, and there's physical depth, but is the wear and tear depth over 162 for all these guys enough? So I think starting pitching, I think the Reds could even look to add starting pitching this offseason. Again, you never, when you think you have enough, you add 2 more starters.
Yeah. And obviously Chase Burns and Rhett Lowder are 2 of them, but you also have guys like Carson Spires and Julian Aguiar and Brandon Williamson, all who are coming off of major injuries as well in 2026, that obviously those injuries will have to be managed. Carson Spires not expected to be ready until well into 2026, but Brandon Williamson and Julian Aguiar certainly are candidates to be ready for spring training or at least early in the season. So I'm sure the Reds will work on managing them. But speaking of Rhett Lowder, who you mentioned, Rhett Lowder added to the Arizona Fall League roster by the Cincinnati Reds. And the Arizona Fall League first pitch was on Monday night, Nick. How are we looking with the Reds so far?
Was we record bottom of the 7th, Peoria. That's our team is leading 4-2. Rhett Lowder pitched in some sort of side game over the weekend, I think. So I don't expect that he'll pitch in an Arizona Fall League game today or tomorrow or anything. But we do have 2 players in action, and so far Cam Collier 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs. Leo Balcazar 1 for 3 with a walk and also stole a base. So good to see. We'll talk about Balcazar here a little bit more coming up.
Yeah, I saw a report on, I guess it would have been Saturday, that Rhett Lowder pitched to 8 batters, struck out 2, gave up 1 hit. So some sort of side work there for Lowder, but was wearing the little arm monitor thing that the Reds are using now to monitor workload, and certainly going to be a key piece that we'll look for in terms of how he progresses this offseason.
I'm told that was an instructional league game. That's basically where players that were like drafted this offseason play, or this past season, like guys like Steele Hall. Not saying Steele Hall was playing in that game, but those type of players. Yep. So that was what he was pitching in games where they don't keep official stats or anything like that.
There you
Other
go.
than the guy that tweeted out and took the camera and unofficial stats.
Yeah, shout out to that guy for tweeting out the photos and for tweeting out the update on the stats. Without that, I don't know that we would have even known that Rhett Lowder pitched. So shout out to, I'll give you a free ad, Frake Photography. It's at Frake Photo, PHRAKE Photo on X. So shout out to you and appreciate the coverage and the info.
There is nothing better than October baseball and grilling out. and I use Omaha Steaks for all my grilling needs. And now during their early Black Friday sale event, you can get 50% off site-wide, plus an extra 20% off select favorites, and our listeners get $35 off with promo code Chatterbox. It's so great to have steaks, hamburgers, and gourmet hot dogs always in my freezer, ready to go. It's so convenient for me to go online and order. I like the value freezer filler package to stay stocked up. The steaks are perfectly aged, hand-cut, and USDA certified tender. The burgers are mouth-watering and grass-fed, but don't sleep on the gourmet hot dogs. They are seriously the best hot dogs I've ever had. Plus, they also carry chicken, pork, seafood, and fantastic desserts. Save big with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their early Black Friday sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code Chatterbox at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Promo code Chatterbox at checkout.
All right, Nick, let's move ahead to the MLB offseason, which is what we really came on here to talk about 25 minutes later. Isn't it a shock that Nick Kirby and Craig Sandlin talk too much? But let's look ahead, right? A lot of decisions are to be made here by Nick Krall and Brad Meador as we head into this offseason. And quite frankly, they don't get a whole lot of time off before they got to start making some of these big decisions because free agency is right around the corner already.
Yeah, free agency begins 5 days after the World Series, so that will be November 2nd if it ends in a sweep, November 6th if it goes 7 games, everything else in between there. Your free agents for the Reds are Nick Martinez, Zach Littell, Emilio Pagan, Miguel Andujar, and Wade Miley. Who might come back from that, Craig? I think the Reds would probably love to bring Nick Martinez back. I think he's a guy that means a lot to this organization. I think that the Reds certainly value him. Certainly would be nowhere close to what he made, the $21 million of a qualifying offer. Emilio Pagan, I think the Reds like him, but I think that someone's going to pay him a lot more as a guy that was a closer all year than the Reds would consider paying. So I would be pretty shocked if there was any way that he came back. Zach Littell, I think, yeah, sure, on a right deal, probably, but I think he's probably going to be a guy who finds more elsewhere. I don't see Miguel Andujar returning. I would be pretty shocked at that. Just doesn't really feel like a guy that is either that big like DH type bat that you want, or B, an outfielder that can actually play defense. Doesn't feel like he fits. Felt like he was a really great addition for a 2-month sprint to the playoffs, which they did succeed in. But I would be pretty shocked if he comes back. Wade Miley, yeah, he can come back on a minor league deal if he wants. That's kind of where I'm at. Any contention with those takes, Craig?
Miguel Andujar feels like such a Nick Krall signing right now, Nick. I'm just going to be blatantly honest with you. Almost no power also, the entire time with the Reds. I don't know what he ended up with in his time with us, maybe 4 home runs. Hit for average, got on base, absolutely demolished left-handed pitching. I'm telling you, like, it just feels like the kind of guy that Nick Krall and Chris Valleca are going to love to have in Great American Ballpark for an entire season. What his payday is going to look like, I don't know. That'll be the big question, is what does a guy like him demand on the open market? But this is a similar conversation, not to like get ahead here, but this is a similar conversation that I think that we should be having about Luis Arraez, because that is the exact kind of signing that the Cincinnati Reds would make this offseason in their quote unquote big splash move, is a guy that potentially is not even valued by anybody else in Major League Baseball because all they care about is power. Yet the Cincinnati Reds, in their desire to just get the ball in play, Luis Arraez fits that and Miguel Andujar fits that.
I hope they're not that dumb. Like, that's just not the type of players that they need to move the needle. They either need guys that can physically play defense and provide some value there, that can also put the ball in play if that's what you want. Luis Arraez is not a good defender. Miguel Andujar is not a good defender. So You either need to put the ball in the seats or you need to be able to catch the hell out of the ball and hit a little bit. If you can't do either one of those, I'm not interested in you this offseason. That is my criteria. I hope that the front office is smart enough to realize that.
I want to make it very clear. I am speaking as if I am thinking like the front office, not like I'm thinking like me. So, yes, I agree with you. If I'm Nick Krall, that's not my move, but just throwing it out there. I'm mentally prepared already for it to happen. And when it does happen, I want to make sure that we clip every time that I brought up Luis Ariz over the last 18 months, because this happened multiple times. All right. Also in that same time frame, Nick, the Reds are going to have some decisions to make about some options, some player on options. I think there's only one real conversation here, but who all do the Reds have to make a decision on as it pertains to options in 2026?
Yeah, Austin Hayes has a $12 million mutual option with a $1 million buyout. Scott Barlow, a $6.5 million club option with a $1 million buyout. Brent Suter, $3 million club option with a $250,000 buyout. Let's start with Hayes. It's very rare that a mutual option ever gets picked up. I will say, Craig, $12 million sounds like about probably his price, but would someone give him multiple years? He is a guy that destroyed left-handed pitching. That's valuable. Played pretty good defense, I will say. Obviously couldn't stay on the field. That was the only reason that he wouldn't even be. He would just, I'm not taking this $12 million option. But in some ways, Craig, it's a little bit of a game of chicken, I think, because the Reds want Hayes to decline the option, because then they don't have to pay the $1 million buyout. If Hayes says, I want to play, and the Reds decline it, then they have to pay him $1 million. So it's kind of almost like a qualifying offer, but not obviously as far. So that'll be interesting. Would I take Hayes for a 1-year, $12 million deal? I think I probably would. I think especially if you go looking deep down, something we'll do more this offseason, like the free agent outfielders. I think a guy that even with Hayes' injury, which was a lot, it's hard to find like that kind of value at $12 million. And I think that's probably why Austin Hayes becomes a free agent. Scott Barlow.
I think, real quick, I think I'm crazy. Maybe I'm not crazy. Didn't it feel like he missed a heck of a lot more games than he did? He played 103 games this year.
It did. It did feel.
It felt like he missed way more than that, didn't it?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I mean, 103 again. 103 games for $5 million at the level that he hit was actually really well. And one funny side note, the Reds' decision to not play Will Benson cost them $100,000, Craig. Because when I was doing the research on this, Austin Hayes had an incentive. If he got 400 plate appearances, he got an extra $100,000. He ended up with, I think, 415. So if they just would have played Will Benson just a little bit more, they would have saved $100,000. So maybe that's why there's this contention with the front office on giving Elly days off. They're like, you cost us $100,000. I'm kind of kidding here, but
yeah.
But I mean, but look, I'm telling you, look at the free agent outfielders.
Austin Hayes had an OPS of 949 against left-handed pitching this year. Yeah. So I mean, I get it. I feel you. It'll be interesting because historically outfielders get overpaid, but Austin Hayes was on the market and available for the Reds for $5 million because he was only able to play 85 games last year. Now you turn around and you play 103 games. How many teams are going to be willing to give you $10+ million a year after back-to-back seasons of missing 59+ games? That'll be the real question for Austin Hayes, and he's going to have to figure out what that market looks like. I don't know what. I would assume that his agent's allowed to have those conversations with other ownership groups to figure out what his value is before he makes that decision. But I guess I don't really know how that whole thing works. I feel bad that I don't. I probably should. But I mean, I think if you were to ask me, do I want Austin Hayes for $12 million or do I want Jeimer Candelario for 15? I think my answer is pretty clear. So maybe it's not as unlikely as I thought it was, but just off the bat, before I really looked at the numbers, I didn't think there was a chance in hell that Austin Hayes was picked up, but maybe there's a chance. You never know.
Yeah. Again, and look at the free agents. There's just it's pretty slim pickings out there for outfielders.
Yeah. All right. Other options that need to be decided on real quick. Scott Barlow at 6.5 feels high to me, but you got to pay him $1 million not to pitch here.
So it's 5.5.
It's like 5.5, which
he's worth 5.5.
Yeah. Tito loves him, right? I mean, that's the real thing is like, does Nick Krall allow Tito to have that decision? And the other piece of it is that just because you don't pick up an option on this guy doesn't mean that you can't renegotiate a different contract with him, right?
Yeah, the Reds did that with Suter last year as the next guy on this list. They literally declined his option and re-signed him right off the rip. Now, Suter's a little bit of a different cat because A, he's not great, and B, he's from Cincinnati and absolutely loves playing here. Barlow's where
and on the back end of his career. But I mean, he wants to finish his career here in Cincinnati. I feel like if the Reds went back to him and was like, hey, we'll bring you back, but we're going to pay you half of what we paid you this year, Suter probably takes that.
Barlow's where you have to have a really good understanding and pulse on what the reliever market's going to look like, because it's hard to know if $5 million for Scott Barlow is a good deal or a bad deal until you really kind of see how the market develops. But the Reds have to make that decision before they really know that. So you have to have kind of a good guess here. And that's what makes it hard, because I could easily see, the Reds pick up that option on Scott Barlow, and then in January and February, I can just see Twitter right now. Oh my gosh, the Dodgers signed this guy for only $3.5 million, and we're paying Scott Barlow $5.5 million. Like, you can see it right now. But you could also get in a situation where relievers start becoming what feels like, wow, that guy got that much money. Wow, Scott Barlow was a steal. It's really hard to know right now. So they're going to have to kind of be able to make their best educated guess on that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Feels like an overpay to me, but again, he's Tito's guy. He came up in some big situations this year. Obviously, he struggled there for a little bit of a stretch, but for 145 games, he was one of Tito's go-to and one of his most trusted relievers out of the bullpen in terms of medium leverage outings. Like, he wasn't going to go to him in a save situation for the most part, but he also wasn't going to him in blowout situations for the most part. So I do think that there's an interesting conversation that will be had there. I don't think it's cut and dry. I could be told either way that the Reds made either decision on that, and I would believe that it happened. So we'll see. Along the same lines, a couple weeks late, right around the same time frame, I apologize. Qualifying offers have to be made. And this one, I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about there, Nick.
Yeah, Martinez doesn't get another qualifying offer. Littell, I don't think qualifying offer. Pagan's not. Andujar's not. Hayes is clearly not, because we're debating if it should be $12 million. So yeah, I think this is the first year where the Reds don't really have anyone that fits this bill. So really the only thing I think you're watching is other teams, because when another team offers a guy a qualifying offer and he declines, well, then that person becomes harder to attain, because the Reds would have to give up a draft pick essentially for them. If the player signs with the Reds for over $100 million, then it's a high up draft pick, aka Sal Stewart. If it's over $50 million, it's still a higher draft pick. I think it's between the second and third round then. So a guy, like, just off the top of my head, guy that maybe the Reds could look at being interested in is like Trent Grisham. I was trying to find a player that might be on the cusp. So if Trent Grisham doesn't get a qualifying offer, he's a lot more attainable for the Reds to get. If he does, then it's going to be harder, because the Reds are going to have to give up a draft pick, which I don't think they're going to want to do. So that's really kind of the only thing from a Reds perspective to watch, as the qualifying offers have to be made, or probably before about November 9th. We haven't got an official date on that. And then they'll have to be decided on by the player if they're given a qualifying offer by November 20th. And then that qualifying offer is usually about $22 million for 1 year. And you can only do that, Craig, on players that have been with the team for a whole year. So guys like Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez, that were traded at the trade deadline, not eligible for a qualifying offer.
Good to know. The 1-year qualifying offer is worth the average salary of the 125 highest paid players in MLB, regardless of position. So that 21 or whatever that number ends up being, that's based on all positions, right? So yeah, that kind of plays into the decisions that the Reds have to make. And that deadline to make the decision kind of lines up with the next deadline that the Reds will have to meet, and that's the deadline to protect their minor league players from the Rule 5 draft.
There's a lot of notable names. That'll be around November 19th. Hasn't been an official date listed yet for that, but there's a lot of players that you know if you've been following the Reds prospects even a little bit. Just the notable ones: Hector Rodriguez, Edwin Arroyo, Leo Balcazar, Jay Allen, Easton Sikorsky, R.I. Franson, Jose Franco, Hunter Parks, Joel Valdez, Jose Acuna, Javi Rivera, Anier Laureano, Carlos Jorge, and Yerlin Confidant. And not on the screen if you're watching is Austin Hendrick, also Rule 5 eligible. But I don't think there's a very difficult decision there. Craig, the one thing that's of note before we kind of get into these players quickly is that I did some digging here on the 40-man roster, and there is plenty of room. There is plenty of room. If the Reds cut who I think they cut, that gets the roster down to 37. And then there's still guys like Sam Ben-Schuster, Reaver San Martin, Ryan Valade, Will Banfield, Sam Mole, Yasver Zulueta, Lyon Richardson, that you could pretty easily, I think, take off the 40-man roster and not lose a lot of sleep. So some years you're really crunched on that. I don't think the Reds are necessarily crunched on that right now as it stands. The for sure's for me are Hector Rodriguez and Edwin Arroyo. I don't think there's any way those guys go unprotected. Leo Balcazar, I would lean no, but he's played in the Arizona Fall League. If he plays really well, he could work his way there like Tyler Callahan did last year. Usually it's pitchers, though. There's very rarely a lot of Rule 5 players that are picked and stay on a roster the whole team that are position players. Remember, we had Cooper Bowman last year, did not make it through spring training. It's very rare that a player does. So there's actually a chance, maybe someone takes a Leo Balcazar, but he doesn't make the team and he comes right back to the Reds. So pitchers are hard, though. Like Easton Sikorsky had a really good year. R.I. Francis, I know a guy that had some really nasty stuff, didn't have a good year, had some pretty inflated games that really made his ERA look a lot worse. Those are two guys that I think Jose Valdez, the guy that the Reds actually picked up off of the minor league portion of the Rule 5 draft last year and had a really good year, so I know they're high on him. And then Jose Franco and Jose Acuna were both guys that the Reds chose not to protect last year and no one claimed them. But both guys had really good years, made it up to AAA. Are they now close enough to where they are? Hunter Parks had a really, really bad year, but throws 100 miles an hour. Actually got it to AA and then got demoted back down to AAA. He got up to AAA, got demoted back down to AA. Then Anier Laureano is one of the most talented players, but he ended the year injured in Daytona. So I doubt he does. But pitchers are the one commodity that teams will take because I was like, hey, I'll just hide this guy at the very back end of my bullpen if I think he has a chance to be a real stud. Tampa Bay is like a team that loves doing stuff like that. So that's the names. We'll kind of see how it shakes out. But Hector Rodriguez, Edwin Arroyo, I think are the two for sures. I don't think any of the other position players, even Carlos Jorge, a guy who I really like, I just don't think a team's going to keep on a roster all year. But the pitchers, good luck figuring that out. It is brutal to try to figure out which guys get kept or not.
It's basically the team is making a $100,000 gamble that player is going to be good enough to be on their roster because they have to pay $100,000 to draft that player, and then that player has to stay on their roster for the entire year. Now, maybe it's not even 100,000 because if they do want to remove that player from the 26-man roster, they get offered back to the original team for $50,000. So it's really a $50,000 gamble.
$50,000 tryout.
Yeah. So, it's really not that expensive, I guess, to take a gamble on a guy like Edwin Arroyo, who you and I had a conversation before we started recording this about Edwin Arroyo, because ultimately, Edwin Arroyo is a solid shortstop, expected to be very good defensively, has struggled somewhat offensively. And he's been at Double-A, right? So the question becomes, okay, is someone willing to gamble $50,000 or $100,000 on Edwin Arroyo being ready to make their 26-man roster this year? And then the other piece of that is, are the Reds willing to gamble that Edwin Arroyo isn't going to be ready for that, right? So these decisions are tough. If what you're saying is accurate and the Reds do in fact have somewhere between 3 and 10 spots on the 40-man roster to be able to make these moves, then it becomes easier, right? But if the expectation is that they don't have that, and the other piece that we talked about before is that players that are currently on the 60-man roster count towards your 40-man during the offseason. And so during the season, you can put a guy on your 60-day IL and they don't count towards your 40-man roster, and you can bring other guys up and add those guys to your 40-man roster. During the offseason, there's no IL. And so until pitchers and catchers report in February, guys like Julian Aguiar and Carson Spires and Brandon Williamson count towards your 40-man roster. So any spaces that become available have to be through either a DFA process or non-tendering in the case of guys that we will talk about as well. So speaking of which, Nick, shortly after the deadline to protect Rule 5 players is that exact deadline, the non-tender deadline.
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, very convenient. MLB Trade Rumors came out with their projections on Monday afternoon. I thought we were going to be flying blind into this, but they did release these early. So I'll read through them for the podcast listeners' sake. This is the projections from MLB Trade Rumors. They've been very good. I mean, their accuracy is unbelievable. The biggest whiff I've seen in a long time was Santiago Espinal. They projected $4 million. He ended up getting like $2.5 million. Now, I also think that there might have been something about he could have maybe fought for more, but the Reds basically said, we'll non-tender you. I don't know. We'll see. But nonetheless, here's their projections. They're projecting Brady Singer, who will be a free agent at the end of 2026. This will be his final year, at $11.9 million. Santiago Espinal at $2.9 million. Gavin Lux at $5 million. Tyler Stephenson at $6.4 million. Ian Jabot, $1.5 million. Sam Moll, $1.2 million. Nick Lodolo, $4.3 million. Graham Ashcraft, $1.4 million. TJ Friedl, $4.9 million. Tony Santillan, $2.4 million. Spencer Steer, $4.5 million. Will Benson, $1.7 million. And Matt McLean at $2.6 million. And Craig, if you tender these guys a contract, you're on the hook for that money. There is some opt-out where you can not have to pay the whole thing if at some point during spring training. I don't remember the exact specifics of that. But typically, if you decide you're tendering these guys a contract, you're stuck with that. And you have till around November 21st. The date has not officially been set yet, but that's when it was last year, to basically say we're keeping this guy or not. And then later on January 9th is when the decisions are made. The deadline to actually have got a contract. If not, they go to arbitration. The Reds try to avoid going to arbitration. But nonetheless, Craig, I mean, some interesting names on here. My quick glance before I hand it back to you is I think Espinal for sure should not be tendered a contract. Ian Jabot, I don't think should be tendered a contract. I think you could probably get him back on a minor league deal. Sam Moll is the one that is iffy for me. Everyone else I think you're keeping, but when I say keep, that doesn't mean you couldn't trade them away.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you keep them. Yeah, I mean, I think Brady Singer is a steal at $11.9 million. I think that is like literally the first thing that stood out to me is he's the most expensive player on there, and he's, at least in my eyes, probably the biggest value even at that point. And so at 11.9, that makes it super easy. He's a guy, Nick, that you obviously tender an offer to, and then you try and negotiate a longer term deal. I think if you can lock up Brady Singer for a couple years and give him that security, he'd be a great guy to keep around. Whether or not he's interested in that, that's up to him, but definitely that. Gavin Lux to me feels like a non-tender at $5 million. Doesn't necessarily fit defensively anywhere, and this Reds team has too many opportunities to improve there. So even though he fits the mold of Chris Valleca and Terry Francona, and you just gave up a draft pick for him, I don't know if he fits long term. Tyler Stephenson at $6.5 million feels high to me, Nick. I'd love to either give him some security and give him a multi-year contract at maybe a little bit of a lower value, or trade him away this offseason. Yeah. And then Nick Lodolo at $4.3 million is another steal to me that jumps out as well. Obviously, he had a good 2025 when he was healthy, but the injury concerns are obvious, but $4.3 million feels pretty low for a guy of his potential.
Yeah, for him, he's a year further away than Singer, so you get less when you're further away. But also, he's not had the durability that Singer has, and Singer's big reason is $11.9 million is a reward for being durable. But yeah, I think I saw some people in our Discord that were at $11.9 million. That's a lot. I'm like, I don't think that's a lot at all. I think for starting pitcher, I mean, the Reds paid Nick Martinez $22 million last year. I think that's perfectly fine. I do not think the Reds should look to be trading Brady Singer. Brady Singer is the one guy that I feel confident can make it through a full season. There's some guys that I think are shown a lot of improvement. I think Andrew Abbott showed a lot of improvement in that regard. I think Nick Lodolo showed a lot of improvement in that regard. But Singer's the only one that's consistently proved it. And I think you need that for sure. So, yeah, I'm all about that. I think I would tender Gavin Lux the $5 million. I think there's someone that would be willing to take a chance on him and on a trade. You might not get a lot for him. I don't think there's not a single team in baseball that wouldn't take him at $5. Like there's someone that would take him at $5 million. And if that's the case, you tender him a contract and trade him, even if it's for not much. But I do agree, like $5 million is way too much for Gavin Lux. He's not as good of a player as Will Benson. I'll die on that hill because he can't play defense. Like there's just no defensive value. So I think the Reds should definitely look to move on from Gavin Lux. The only thing that gives me caution on that is just Gavin Lux is a free agent at the end of next year. Man, I just could see him being like having that free agent year, man. That's a real thing. It's a real thing. Someone gets in his ear, hey, if you try to pull the ball a little bit more, you try to sneak out maybe 15, 20 home runs at Great American Ballpark, your value will skyrocket. And then my last thought here is I do disagree with you. I don't think Tyler Stephenson at $6.4 million in his final year, I don't think that's a lot at all for catchers. The Cleveland Guardians paid Austin Hedges $8 million 1 year to catch, Craig.
Yep, I get it. I understand it. But Tyler Stephenson gave you less than 300 at-bats in 2025 and continues to be hurt seemingly every year. But I don't know. Only played in 88 games this year. I don't know.
To find
when he's good, he's one of the best. I just don't have faith that he can stay healthy. That's my biggest concern. Just for reference, right? Because we're talking about this. Spotrac has a pretty good tool that allows you to look at projected free agents and their open market value. Now, it's not perfect. We all understand that, but it gives you a general frame of mind of value. And here's a couple of guys who are either expected to be free agents or have options in 2026 that may lead to them being free agents and their projected market value according to Spotrac, right? So let me just start with the top of the top, and that's guys like William Contreras, who will be back with the Milwaukee Brewers. He has a club option for $12 million. He's market value at 15. Salvador Perez, I think, is retiring, right? So we don't have to worry about him. But JT Realmuto is making $23 million this year. He's an unrestricted free agent with a projected market value of less than $13 million. Danny Jensen, who just beat the Reds and hit a home run against the Reds in the last series of the season. Mutual option for $12 million, likely won't be picked up. His market value is right around $7 million. James McCann, 5.8. Gary Sanchez, 4.3. Mitch Garver, 3.5. Elias Diaz, 2.5. Victor Caratini, who is a guy who is a platoon plug-and-play kind of catcher guy, $2.2 million projected. So I don't know. I think that you could probably get some good value on the trade market for a guy like Tyler Stephenson, especially at $6.4 million. But I don't know that I'm just saying, for me personally, I don't get excited about Tyler Stephenson right now as much as I'd like to, but I also don't get excited about Jose Trevino. So that leaves the Reds in a pretty tough predicament after we just talked about Will Banfield being potentially removed from the 40-man roster and not really having anybody else ready to go. So probably have to keep Stevenson at this point, but 6.5 still feels a little bit high to me.
What was JT Realmuto's contract projection?
Spotrac has it at 13 million AAV.
You know, since 2023 that JT Realmuto has played in 368 games and Tyler Stephenson has played in 368 games. Tyler Stephenson has played in the 8th most games among catchers since 2023. He had a bad year injured, but I mean, like, that happens to every catcher. He played 142 games in 2023, 138 in 2024. I think there's a lot of recency bias. I mean, I again, if you're really out on Tyler Stephenson, this is what I encourage you, Reds fans. I encourage you to go to an MLB film room and just start watching every single at bat from Jose Trevino in the second half. Every single one of them. You just start watching that, and you will. Okay, yeah, I'm on board. That's $6 million for Tyler Stephenson. Double it if you need it. Double it if you need it. We're keeping him.
Well, JT Realmuto is also 5 years older than Tyler Stephenson, so the fact that he's missing games is a little bit more acceptable in his year 32, 33, and 34 seasons versus Tyler Stephenson in his 26, 27, 28 seasons.
Eighth most in baseball,
prime,
Craig.
His prime seasons, Nick.
Caught more than Will Smith. More than Will Smith, too. The head of Will Smith.
Okay.
Catchers
it is
get
what
hurt.
It is. Catchers get hurt. That's why I hesitate to give them big money free agency contracts or big contracts in general.
$6 million is not a lot on a 1-year deal.
It's
good
not.
luck finding Tyler Stephenson. Anyone close to that for $6 million that has the offensive upside at catcher. And we have ABS coming too, baby. He's going to become even more valuable.
That's very true. That's very true. But correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you said this already. 2026 is the final year that Tyler Stephenson is under arbitration. So
he's a free agent after next year.
He hits free agency after next year. How does that affect how you attack this offseason with him? Again, I'm all about keeping him. Can we sign him to a 4-year deal at $20 million? Can we sign him to a 4-year deal for 22?
Yeah, I'm absolutely looking at that for sure. I think that if I'm Tyler Stephenson, and I'm in his camp, I'm telling Tyler Stephenson, don't accept a pennies on the dollar contract. You are one great 2026 season away from getting a massive payday because teams, catchers that hit are a rare breed that hit like Tyler Stephenson's potential when he's going well. So yeah, that's the thing with Tyler Stephenson. I'd be saying you're gonna have to pay me close to what I feel like I'm potentially worth. I'm not taking a massive pay cut just because I'm gonna gamble on myself. And I hope, and I think there's a real chance though. We're doing this show on October 2026 while the Reds are in the playoffs, obviously. And we're talking about should the Reds be offering Tyler Stephenson a qualifying offer? Because I think that's a real possibility.
$20+ million a year.
Again, Craig, I mean, this guy, like, it's just so, I feel like it's just so recency bias with him. I mean, I feel like if we were talking about Tyler Stephenson after the year he had in 2024, where he put up a 113 WRC plus, he was a 3-win catcher. I think we all would have said, yeah, if he was a free agent at the end of that year and we could get him on a 1-year, $20 million deal, we say, yeah, sign me up. I mean, that catchers are crazy expensive.
I think you're overestimating it. How many catchers in 2025 made more than $21 million?
I don't know. Do you have it in front of you?
One, JT Realmuto. The next highest was Salvador Perez at $20.5 million.
And Tyler Stephenson's out hit JT Realmuto over the last.
Tyler Stephenson. That's not what this show's about, Nick. But Tyler Stephenson's not getting a JT Realmuto type of contract with as bad as he is defensively and as inconsistent as he's been offensively. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, how much is JT Realmuto's contract? 5 years, $115 million. I'm talking 1 year, $20 million. That's nothing compared to that.
Oh my God!
What was Salvador Perez's contract?
Let me ask you this, Nick, and this is just a legitimate question in terms of, what do you think? So just to answer your question, Salvador Perez was 4 years, 82. 2027, which is the year we're talking about, free agency for the catcher's market. You're looking at Jonah Heim, Ryan Jeffers, and Dalton Varsho all also being on the market. Does that change Tyler Stephenson's approach, knowing that he could have a great 2026 and become the most attractive catcher out of all of them? Or he could have another 2026 like he had in 2025 and be behind guys like Jonah Heim and Dalton Varsho and maybe even Ryan Jeffers?
Maybe, but all those teams that are losing those guys, they're going to need catchers too. So, like, you're also going to have teams that need catchers as well. So, if I'm Tyler Stephenson, I'm open to a deal, but I'm not taking a contract that I feel like is way below what the value I could get the next year is.
But if I'm the Reds, I'm also not giving him a deal that's multi-year and worth more than $7 million a year, I don't think, which is where we're going to kind of come into a crossroads where I don't think the Reds are going to find a value that makes sense for Stephenson, and I don't think Stephenson's going to have a value that makes sense for the Reds.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the Reds have the back pocket. They have the qualifying offer as well. If he plays really, really well, okay, we're going to get a draft pick out of it. If he
what does a potential strike play into this, or lockout, I should say?
Yeah, I guess that's a whole other.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of lockout and baseball owners, the MLB Winter Meetings coming up.
Yeah, December 8th through 10th.
Transition.
The Reds, for the first time ever, are not draft lottery eligible because they made the playoffs. So we won't get to see the ping pong balls, and that's sad. I enjoyed that every year. So we'll just watch other teams do that. The Reds will be locked into the 19th pick, I think. We'll have the Rule 5 draft, which is certainly interesting. Reds, have been a while since the Reds have picked up a Rule 5 draft that mattered. Maybe this is the year, but obviously the winter meetings are always interesting, and this is a Reds team, Craig, that I expect will be very aggressive trade-wise this offseason. They were last year. They put off a lot of trades. There was a lot of trades that this team did last year. I think they'll be looking to do the same kind of thing again. Just because I do think, and we've said many times on the show, I do think there was too many players. There's too many average position players on this roster. I think you do need to kind of move some guys and shuffle some things around.
Yeah, and we'll remind you of Jeff Brantley's comments at the end of the season about how he thinks that there's some big surprises in store for the Cincinnati Reds this offseason. We kind of mentioned it in passing, but just to reiterate on it, obviously the arbitration filing deadline after the non-tender deadline, the arbitration filing deadline is January 9th. So that's when players hopefully have an agreement in place with their clubs for a contract. And if they don't, that's when they can proceed to arbitration, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then some exciting news as well. Obviously some details to be worked out from Chatterbox Sports, but Redsfest is back in 2026, Nick.
Yeah, in January, which I love. I hated doing it like right in the middle of like December and Christmas, and half the time it'd be like the day of the crosstown shootout. And so no, I love that it's in January. It's only in January because it's the first event at the newly renovated Duke Convention Center. Obviously was not held last year, so excited to be back. Yes, I am planning to come down in some capacity. I don't know if we'll do anything officially or not. But I'll be there in some form. Maybe we'll try to do some sort of get together or something, but of course we'll keep you posted on that. But yeah, very exciting. Redsfest, January 16th through 17th, 2026.
Nick, what if I told you I've never been to Redsfest?
Well, this is your year. I mean, you're going to be a celebrity now, Craig. You are an official host of Chatterbox Reds, so people will know you.
Famous. Well, at least the people that have made it this far in the video will know who I am. And definitely if I can make it back to Cincinnati, maybe this will be the year that I get there. And I've had a chance to meet a couple of you now at events that we've hosted in person and just through random meetings outside of Chatterbox events, but always appreciate you stopping up and saying, hey, if you do see us in the public, feel free to say hi to Nick, Trace, or myself. We love to hear from you and put faces to names. And Redsfest seems like it'll be a great opportunity to do that. And Nick, this isn't the last video we have coming out in the near term. Got a couple more videos coming out over the next week or two that will cover more of this off season, including a look at the depth chart for the Cincinnati Reds, including some free agency targets as well, that will kind of play GM and put together our roster for next year. But until then, we hope that you're enjoying the playoffs. We hope that you're enjoying football season, and we hope that you're enjoying the Chatterbox Sports content that we put out all year long, covering all of your favorite Cincinnati sports teams, from FC Cincinnati and the Flying Lion podcast to the Cincinnati Bengals and Chatterbox Bengals to, of course, the Cincinnati Reds. For Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds. Until next time, everybody, go Reds.